Good evening, everyone. Hope all of you are doing well. Hope all of you have had a good week. Today we have with us Brother Neville from UK, sharing with us his thoughts on how to make your love real. What is real love? Almost no one asks that question. Instead, nearly every day, they ask, what is love? Ask 100 people the definition of love, and everyone gives you a different answer. Most of them is confusing. Today, Brother Neville will be sharing with us about this topic. Brother Neville has been practicing and teaching meditation for more than 40 years. He is an author and a journalist. He's been writing on the theme of health and medicine throughout many years. Let us now welcome Brother Neville. Good morning, Brother Neville.
Good morning from the UK to Indonesia. It's so amazing.
Yes, indeed.
Thank you very much for that welcome. It's a marvelous privilege to be with you.
Same here, brother.
You know, when you speak of my having been meditating for about 40 years, I feel a little embarrassed. I feel I should really be like a flying angel by now, but anyway, I've certainly gained a lot over these years, and it'll be a pleasure to share something of that with you. So, yes, how to make your love real. And this actually is a topic that really does come from my heart, because I feel that that's the biggest gift that I've received through my study, my spiritual study and practice over these years. When I was a child, I feel as if there was a certain innocence of spirit that meant that I sailed through my early years in a kind of, I suppose I'd call it a bit of a bubble. I had a lovely mum, and I went to primary schools that were kindly. And then from the age of 11, when I went to secondary school and things got a little, an all boys secondary school, things got a bit tougher. And especially back in the 50s, the 1950s in England, it was not really a very positive culture. There was quite a lot that I would say in a way, I feel that actually back in the 30s, 40s, 50s, humanity reached a kind of low point. I think in some ways, even though we do see some continuing decline, I feel as if at that time, things were very fossilized. You know, there wasn't real love. There wasn't real respect for the institutions. We tended to do things just because you were told to, and there was a lot of fear around, which is not conducive to healthy human beings. Somehow, although there are bad things that continue to happen, but there's a lot of good to be seen in the world too still. Or rather, even perhaps even more in some ways today, even though underneath, I'm very clear that that there are some deep fault lines threatening to break through that are going to make things pretty tough for us, and therefore to really understand what real love is and how we can nourish it and hold on to it is very helpful for everybody. So part of the problem, I think, as I remember it, when it must have been about 12, and I remember suddenly realizing that my mother's sisters, I remember seeing that they had defects. Up till then, they'd just been people. You know, do you remember this as a child? You just accept people as they are. But then as you enter your teenage years, you suddenly start to see that people, they're not always right, and they do have weaknesses. Of course, you get upset about things before then, but you don't project your dissatisfaction onto others in quite that way that comes in adults. And accompanying that that tendency to be disillusioned, there can also be a lack of self-respect because, well, you know, it's what you're feeding yourself. Your state of being at any time is dependent on the kind of things that you're allowing yourself to see. And you can't walk around in a bubble permanently, but there are ways of living where that love shines through. And that's really where I want to go to with this chat. So anyway, somehow survived through to my university days. And in my first year there, I met someone I fell very deeply in love with. I remember they lived several miles outside the town where I was studying, and I used to, just for the sake of a few minutes extra with them in the evening, I would miss the last train back home, and it would mean a 5-mile walk, but I wouldn't mind in the slightest. I was so in love. And it wasn't actually reciprocated. I mean, this other person didn't have that same need to lose themselves in another as I did. And somehow I recognized that, and I didn't think that the relationship would have a long-term future because of that. And we parted for a year or so, and then came together again and got married and had children and had some good years together. But there was still this, what I would call dependency. When I say I fell in love, looking back, I don't see that in such a positive light. I know mostly we view falling in love as a very beautiful thing. And of course, the experience is of extreme bliss. But actually, it's a sort of immature state in a way. You're not seeing clearly. Rather like when I was a child, you know, just that childlike innocence. It's not enough. So as time went on and my wife had this sort of feline, cat-like, you know, self-sufficiency, I didn't really like that, and I became more and more anxious, I think, about that. And it was something similar in my work too, that I went into newspaper work. I got a lot from it, but there was always that ego element associated with it, which makes you go up and down. You know, you get a good result in a story, and then you're up, and then things don't work out so well, so you're down. It's a real roller coaster of stress. And with the children, I was fortunate because my wife was really keen to get going with her own career. I looked after our sons quite a lot when they were little. I used to have an evening job, afternoon and evenings in the newspapers, and I would care for them in the mornings for a few years when they were little, and that was a privilege. But again, was it real love? I'm not sure. I feel as if in a way they found me a good, fun father, but I feel in a way I was sort of trying to relive that bubble of innocent childhood still, which means that I was trying to take something from it, which means that it's not real love, actually. So these are subtle things, aren't they? And sometimes when there is that taking attitude, then it can lead to big clashes later, you know, like when boys grow up, if their dad has a lot of investment in them, which luckily by the time they were in their teenage years, I'd started practicing meditation and I was changing. But I think some fathers have real difficulty letting go of their sons if the fathers have been living through the children, you know, trying to get their own sense of self-respect from what the kids get up to. Then they get very upset with the children and you get all sorts of clashes, which is pretty unhealthy. So some of these fault lines were building up in my own life, both in the workplace and in the longer term relationship. And I started to feel really quite exhausted. I think I was probably, even though I wasn't really facing what was going on, subconsciously, I knew that somehow my work, I was getting into my mid-30s. I couldn't maintain the energy and effort that I was putting into it. I was doing well in work, but it was taking a tremendous amount out of me. And then the time came when I felt there just isn't enough love in the home. And that realization did lead me to step away from the newspaper work for 2 or 3 years. And that was when I met the Brahma Kumari's Spiritual University. I learned Raja Yoga meditation, and it made an immediate difference in my happiness. But you can fall in love with a movement as well, and fall in love. And I feel as if I brought the same mistake to my relationship with the movement as I had done with Liz, my wife. That I started to fall in love with this movement, and that neuroscientists tell us that when you are deeply in love, that is actually a time when a lot of change can happen. So there's benefit within it, but it's still not real love. I felt a tremendous sense of happiness, but really what I was doing was I was taking again from these divine sisters as I saw them. They had such a beautiful vibration of truth. When I came into their company and I saw their virtuous behavior, I saw how they conducted meetings with so much peacefulness and all the rest of it. And this was actually, excuse me, so sorry. I'm going to silence my phone. I'm just going to switch it off. There we go. Sorry. Yeah, so I was making the same mistake with the Brahma Kumaris as I had done with falling in love with Liz, that there was a kind of dependency growing. But again, it moved me and it brought me in contact with a whole new way of understanding. And so there was benefit there. But it was to be some years really, before I started to really make the shift inside that allowed real love to emerge. And this is rather amazing. I didn't realize that it would be like this. I was working in my mid-30s, and when I returned to the newspaper work after that break, I was working as a medical and science correspondent, and I learned a lot about how exhaustion can set you up for ill health, heart attack, cancer, all sorts of illnesses that can develop. So I did actually learn, I gravitated towards doctors at that time who taught me that the mind was really such an important component in health, that if you're persistently unhappy or stress-filled or fearful, then that has very severe consequences on the body. Of course, for a short while you experience those things, that's part of life. Our bodies are very resistant and resilient, but if you don't find solutions to your worries and they continue over a long period, then it can drain you in a major way. So after coming into this study and practice, where I was at least feeling the happiness of having found some fresh hope for the future because of the spiritual understanding, even though it wasn't really mine, which is the point I'm trying to make here. But I was practicing it, and I was drawing on the beautiful vibrations of meeting these lovely yogi people. And so I got some strength back, and I went back into the newspaper business. I had a great few years, I had to say. I had about 10, 12 years where I was really riding high because of managing myself much better. But halfway through that, my wife, who by this time we'd been together nearly 25 years, our sons were at university, and she said that she wanted us to separate. because she said that she'd never had the experience of being a single woman, and she wanted to experience that. And this revealed that my relationship was not truly loving. I mean, what happened was that I was very resistant about this idea. I didn't want to lose family life. I liked it. And I had what I thought was love for Liz. But the she was very upset when I said I didn't see that at all. I didn't want us to separate. But then I consulted one of the senior sisters of the Brahmakumaris in London, and she said, I said, you know, Liz wants us to separate. And she said, do you love Liz? I said, yes. And she said, well, you'll want what Liz wants then, won't you? I had no argument to that. It was logical, but it wasn't what my heart was telling me. And but anyway, I had enough, you know, one of the benefits of having become so kind of falling in love with these sisters was that I did as I was told. And I went back and I told Liz, okay, if that's really what you want, then let's do that. And she was very pleasantly surprised. And so we separated. And the thing was, though, that this was actually, I was doing this because I was told to, not because I was free of the attachment that was really what was holding me previously and making me so resistant to the idea of losing Liz. I hope you're with me on this. It's perhaps some of you may be familiar with these similar sort of dynamics. I think they're not uncommon, where what we think is love is really a kind of psychic dependency or attachment, where one way or another you've allowed yourself to become so entangled with another person that it feels as if they're going to be moved away from you, whether through death, through divorce, through whatever, ill health, through work, it feels like you're going to lose a part of yourself. And that's what it felt like for some years. In my case, it was quite tough. So how did this eventually get resolved? Well, as I said, I had a great stretch of work that kept me going, if you like. I lost myself in my work for some years. And then I got an invitation to go and live and work at a newly opened retreat center near Oxford. And I was there for many years. And that was actually a really good experience, not always comfortable by any means, because it was the first time I'd lived in a community. I was still missing my family in a way, and learning to kind of fit in with all the demands of a community, having thousands of guests coming through every year was quite tough. But it gradually taught me some of the qualities that are needed for real love to start to emerge, because real love comes from within. It's not something that is triggered by an external object. Not real love. Real love is a state of being. It's the problem is that we've got so many things obscuring it in today's world that it often doesn't feel as if we've got that love, but we have. It's in there. It's just got buried over by various bits and pieces of wrong thinking. But in my case, quite a lot of wrong thinking. So, well, what were those bits of wrong thinking? One of them was this materialistic scientific idea that we're really just lumps of matter who over billions of years have managed to develop a mind. That's how I used to think. And that's the way most scientists think, but it's incredibly wrong. It's actually wrong scientifically. It's now really clear scientifically and philosophically that consciousness or mind is primary in the universe. I've been studying this recently. It's a great field that has helped me a lot. But it's not only that that wrong understanding that gets in the way, but the way that when we don't recognize that we're spirit, and identify with the brain and the body, you haven't got much chance of taking the reins. You just are. Your mind is, you think it's produced by your brain, and you are just pushed this way and that by whatever happens. You're not in charge. But when you make this separation to understanding that you are actually something distinct from the brain and the body, from the matter of your being, that's like a costume that you use to play your part, when you make that shift, that's really empowering. And it took many years in my case. And all the things that helped were living at the retreat center, gradually having my ego knocked out, one way or another, learning more true self-respect through meditative practices, through going within, and the good karma. This is one of the teachings that if you do, there's an old Indian saying, isn't it, that if you feel you're missing something, then donate it and it will come to you. And it was rather similar like that under the leadership of one of the original yogis, Daddy Janki, one of the original founders of the Spiritual University, the retreat center prospered very well because we were taught to quell our narrowness of outlook and develop a giving attitude. And of course, we were all limited in our ability to do that, but gradually, through trial and error, we gradually got better and better at it. And the very fact of sharing some of these kind of ideas of a spiritual nature to thousands of people was a great privilege, actually, that helped me make that shift from what the sisters call a stone intellect. I always joke that mine was like reinforced concrete, from a stone intellect to something with more truth in it. So that has definitely been a part of the process, that the opportunities for sharing these ideas, even though they weren't actually, I wasn't really fully living them, but gradually as you speak about these things, then they, you have to eventually pull yourself up to fit with what you're talking about. So change came at last, and this is the issue, real change. I feel that in today's world, there is so much joy to be found in letting go, in not making demands of life, but understanding that life has a right to ask things of me and to go with that flow. And I'm much better at that than I used to be. And that came with this switch in awareness from thinking of myself as Neville and the brain and the body to thinking of myself as the soul, that individuated consciousness that runs the matter and plays this part of Neville. So another thing that I've learned that helps with this shift to soul awareness, and with that, as I'll explain, comes this real sense of love. Another thing that helps is when you realize that certain types of thought drain you of that strong awareness, and that certain types of thought nourish that strong awareness. And when you start to see the difference between those, you get better and better at being attentive to making sure that you are nourishing your heart and mind, and in a way the soul itself, re-emerging those original beautiful tendencies by recognizing when negative thinking is coming in. It's whenever you hurt, whenever you feel angry, upset, whenever you're drawn out of that cool self-awareness by having your buttons pressed by other people or situations. And it doesn't change overnight, but it's a long haul. It'll probably go on to the end of my life, attending to these things that drain me of energy, but gradually getting better and better at it. And then the battery of your well-being starts to build up a charge that means that you can do more and more in terms of what you can cope with, because I think when we're very depleted, which many of us are in today's world, then it makes you fearful and you sort of back off from fulfilling your real potential. But as you build that charge up with this internal connection with truth, you feel you can face situations much more readily. It is one thing just to mention along the way is that it's important not to suppress your negativity. That's so important. It's another of the mistakes I made along the way. If you suppress, if you kind of put controls on your behavior, which might masquerade, might pretend to be virtues, that's superficial. It's not good enough, and in fact, it's counterproductive. It's better that you face up to the fact of how you are in your so-called fallen state. That recognize that these negative tendencies are there, and then you can deal with them. But if you push them out of sight, if you pretend to be virtuous, then they push their way through from your subconscious. They won't disappear, and they create more difficulty for them than if you're honest about them. But that can be quite a trap on the religious or spiritual path, I feel, that you feel that you see an ideal of how you want to be, and then if you're not equally balanced in understanding that you're not that yet, but that is your truth underneath everything, and you're getting back to that, that's the right way. But if you don't maintain that balance, and instead you pretend that you're doing better than you really are, then it's actually going to lead to things like shame and guilt, or false pride, a false sense of being better than you are, or you've got this shame. You think the shame is associated with things that are real in one sense, but not in a deeper sense. They're just that you've lost your truth for the time being. So that takes you in the wrong direction. So what is the right direction? Well, I've learned in one word, what we in the Spiritual University call it remembrance. It's a complex word. It's a simple enough word, a bit like, I like thinking of it as the opposite of being dismembered. If life, the way many of us have lived it, pulls us into pieces. You're pulled this way, you're pulled that way, you're pulled the other way, and it's difficult to feel focused and together. But remembrance actually allows you to focus on the soul, that deep inner self, your original. It's always there, but later in time, such as we find ourselves now, there are these mixed motives even within the soul. But you focus on the soul, and you focus on what was original to the soul, which is its love and its beauty and its power and its peace and its joy. And when you start to kind of realize that is in you, and you don't need to look for it outside, then you've unlocked, you've found the key to really a big transformation. It is phenomenal, the change that happens. I'm not pretending it's easy. Some people do it very quickly. In my case, I got some immediate benefits, but many mistakes as well over the years. So it's taken quite some time before that sort of real sense of fortune opened up, but it's happened. It's and as well as the intrinsic qualities in the soul, there's also the understanding within Raja Yoga, which means royal union, that you're connecting with a very pure source, a source that has unlimited wisdom and love and peace, all the qualities that are original in you, but which you've lost through your journey through time. And so this is the real meaning of yoga. It has the same root as religion, which means to retie. So actually it's a very beautiful thing. It's connection. But the subtlety of it is that you're not able to make that connection through just through longing or through worship. That doesn't actually work. What really works is understanding that you are that, not that you're God, but that you've come from that source and that the qualities in that one are also yours. That's the key. It's amazingly transformational understanding. If you really get that, then that's what empowers you and moves you forward, because our understanding is that whereas all humans in the course of the history have, to different degrees, lost that ability to live with that pure self-awareness, that source, God, always retains that full, pure consciousness. And so when we connect with God by firstly understanding ourselves to be incorporeal, non-physical, and then having the awareness that our own original qualities are very positive, that acts like a sort of a resonance that allows you to connect with that source and fill with power, even more power yourself, so that you get the strength through that companionship and connection. You get the strength to continue to improve your own actions and reactions in everyday life. So that's really what I wanted to share. I mean, I think one of the things I've intimated already, that I feel that the whole world is going through a kind of crisis of character right now. We, you know, in the past, maybe we had kings or queens or leaders who really did have some high quality, but it's pretty rare in today's world. And so the mixed motives that are present in everyone mean that we're all rather lost. And this crisis of character makes it all the more necessary for us to have a practice. If we're going to not be disillusioned and angry about things, which doesn't help anyone, if we're actually going to live with real love, it makes it all the more necessary that we connect with that one, rather than have expectations of those around us or the world around us. And that has made a big difference. I saw it immediately changing my attitudes at work. Many years back, my motives became more giving, less ego-driven. But I'm very happy that in my personal relationships too, that a transformation has happened. As I say, there was a bit of a mess around that time when Liz wanted us to separate after our boys had grown up. I was very unhappy about that. But eventually I realized that it wasn't love that was making me mourn the loss of my family life. It was attachment and a false identification. It's not that there's anything wrong with family life, but when we're kind of not giving within it, but taking from it, everything is liable to turn sour. And since this different energy has come into me in a substantial way, I found that all of my family are coming closer. The children, the grandchildren, Liz, my ex-wife, we work very closely. She's done a number of books for the Brahma Kumaris now. She's also a professional writer. And so it's kind of strange how it's come full circle, and I feel so grateful that that I have made this journey from what I thought was love, falling in love, which actually was not falling in. I mean, it wasn't real love. It was falling, but it was falling into a bit of a trap. I don't regret it. In both instances, the falling in love, both with Liz and then with the spiritual understandings, in both instances, it prompted me to change direction in life in ways that ultimately proved very valuable. But better than falling in love is to emerge real love. And that depending on your state of being. When you've got a good stock of self-respect and strength inside you, then someone else may shout at you, they may be rude, but you're going to be able to have a much more positive attitude towards it, even if you let it affect you, which hopefully you won't. But even if you do, then very quickly after the situation, you can see how you might be able to put it right and how you can remove the hurt from yourself. This is a very wonderful capacity, because it means that you maintain a positive attitude towards others, even when they're behaving negatively. So, you know, like if someone's upset with you and they're angry, you kind of hold in mind, well, they're really asking for love, and you've something or other that you've done or said, they've felt that that was meaning that you didn't love them or respect them. And so you can, when you approach it that way, you can think, well, how can I make good that sense of lack that they have? It's a whole shift, instead of, oh, how dare they speak to me like that, or any of that sort of stuff, you know? Such a difference in life if you can make that shift. So finally, to continue it, the world is full of, it's like that they call it the pilgrimage of remembrance. It's a real pilgrimage. There are many pitfalls, there are things that can take you off this way, that way. You need to remain alert, because we've got very deep habits of what the yogis call body consciousness, you know, an identification with your body, with the roles it plays, with your relationships. But if we can remain alert, use situations that hurt to be as signals that you've still got some more work to do to strengthen yourself, so that that love remains real and is not just something that is doled out a little bit here and there in return for some goodies that you expect in return. So I think that's it really, what I wanted to share. I suppose finally, just to emphasize that everything that we need is within us. It's all there. It's just a question of uncovering it. And I think understanding is important to that, and attention. It's like there's a famous Rumi quote that your task is not to seek for love, but merely to seek and find all the barriers within yourself that you have built against it. Your task is not to seek for love, but merely to seek and find all the barriers that you yourself have built against it. And we do, because of that loss of innocence, you know, of hurting in this world, we do build barriers. But now is the time, because of this crisis of character that the world faces, we have to really grow up and stop protecting ourselves and find out how to let go of that narrow self-protection and align ourselves with these deeper truths that allow real love to come into the world. And that will automatically not only help us, but it'll help the whole world as well. I've got this conviction that will be is the best way forward for humanity. So thank you for listening to that. And I don't know now, Jabin, shall we have a short meditation perhaps? Is that the thought?
Yes, brother, if you could guide us to meditation for a few
Okay.
minutes.
And then we can see if there are any comments or questions.
Yes, thank you.
Okay, great.
Thank you.
There's a nice saying by an Elizabethan poet, Sir Philip Sidney, that about meditation: to grow rich in that which never taketh rust. To grow rich in that which never taketh rust. It's like connecting with the eternal rather than temporary. And that's what meditation does. It entails bypassing or removing those barriers to our love, connecting with the real self, and then connecting to God. And I find personally that often my best way in is a feeling rather than a thought. You know, a feeling like the huge privilege of meeting Jabeen and all of you on this Saturday. The beauty of the things that I've learned and I'm still learning. That sense of appreciation brings a vibration of positivity into my heart and mind. And it's that is truth. Negativity, upset, all the things that get in the way of that truth, they are a part of reality, but they're not my truth. And they actually deplete me of strength. So I embrace the positive, that I am peace. I am a life energy of love and joy. I am. And so are you. Everyone is, originally, and we just have to re-emerge that. So I am love, peace, and happiness. And in that vibration, in that awareness, I can become aware of the Supreme, who's like a spiritual sun that never loses power, always radiates those same qualities. This connection actually creates a kind of flow into my physical as well as soul being. It's like I'm tapping into an ocean of peace and love. And my heart, my physical heart, fills with strength. And the naturalness of this feeling radiates out through a field that envelops all the souls of the body, all the cells of the body. Something like 50 trillion of them. They love me for bathing them in this light. And they function smoothly and healthily as a result of it. This is like a stage that builds up internally. A strong, stable stage on which to base your life. It's the sort of interface between the divine and the human. And it comes through connection. when I get the knack of this connection, making this connection, I can keep coming back to it whenever I remember. Very simple. We speak of it as if it's you make God your companion in life. It guides you how to act, how to be. How to love. A love that only gives. A love that doesn't demand. That's real love.
Thank you, brother. That was very nice, very peaceful. Before we start with the question and answers, I would just like to review what you have shared with us today. It was very nice of you to share your journey, your experiences, all throughout how you have found real love, how have you acquired it, and how you could identify. The main is that this is what is real love. And like you very correctly said, that we all go through this roller coaster of emotions, especially now with the lockdown and with this pandemic going on. I think more so we are going through this roller coaster of emotions. And like you said, the taking attitude is another thing that we all have, that we keep on taking. So what we need to do is make the shift to allow real love to emerge. So I think you have left us with this homework that we need to do. We need to work on this, like you said, because it takes time. So we need to make the shift to allow real love to emerge. And another one, which is very important, is that mind is such an important component for good health. So we have to take care of our mind. So what I gathered from today is real love is unconditional, the kind of love that we all want. In real love, there is no disappointment, impatience, irritation, or anger. Unconditional love or real love gives us happiness that we all acquire. It fills us up, heals our pain, and makes us whole again. So yes, we have this homework that we are all going to work on to acquire this real love. We have a lot of interesting questions today. I'll read out to you the first question we have on YouTube. It is, why is that sometimes even though you are in this knowledge or you have any spiritual knowledge, but application in terms of detachment takes a long time? Like stop interfering in life of close family members.
Yeah, very good question. I certainly, in my case, the detachment and real love with my sons came quite quickly. Something to do with the power of what I was taking into myself, because they were 11 and 12 when I started. And I was probably a little bit too detached during that second half of their childhood, but I definitely started to see them rather than as extensions of myself, which I think is the big trap. I saw them as souls, as individuals in their own right, and some of the decisions that were made about their education and their future were really good, and because of that letting go and that respect for them as individuals rather than just my sons kind of thing. That was quite quick in my case. Uh, I think I think it may partly have been because I knew them well from having had that when they were little, that first 3 or 4 years of their life, I saw a lot of them. And maybe that was one of the reasons why that one came quite quickly. But the tough one was Liz, and that's been a long haul for that to fall into place. I think it has to do with the degree to which you've allowed yourself to become psychically, like your psyche has become entangled with another's. This seems to be the problem. It's like a web that gets woven. This entanglement of psychic being that can take a lot of unraveling. I think in my case, one of the things that finally saw more rapid progress in that, excuse me, was when the penny really dropped that this is God and this is me. I even though I might have said those things earlier in my spiritual journey, I didn't really get the feeling of it. It was only when that penny dropped, and frankly, I was helped in that to some extent by working as a science writer and seeing this new paradigm they call post-materialist science, the new paradigm in science, which says matter is not primary, mind is primary, and it's still at the margins, but there's some very good people pursuing this. That helped me because there has to be that shift, that cognitive shift. It's not enough just to sit in a bubble of peace, because that will certainly help, like I explained it did with me in those early years, but it's not enough. Then to really overcome the more deep-seated entanglements and traps that we've fallen into in the past, to really get ourselves out of that quicksand, you need very, very strong link to spiritual power. And that means understanding the soul deeply and understanding God deeply, and really, really accepting that God's actually here to pull us out of the bog at this time. When that fell into place, I got the power to move beyond that entangled state that I had with Liz. But it was many years, I have to say. So that's my principal answer from my experience. Definitely the practice of remembrance, of sitting quietly, of practicing yoga, meditation. Of course, all of that is moving you in the right direction, but it's this shift in understanding, so that I think the Hindi word is nishchay. It like means conviction inside you. Yes, this really is what's going on. And in my case, and probably for most of us, some get it very quickly, but with others it takes time. But it's when that nishchay develops that really this is what's going on. I am a soul. I'd lost my truth. God's here to explain what's been happening. I can now connect with that one and be freed from the influence of the past. That gives the power to really go beyond these family tendencies where we feel we've got to be involved in this and we get upset because of that. And the other tip is, as I mentioned earlier, every time that you find yourself becoming upset about something, resist the temptation to blame the other. It's terribly difficult at times, but it doesn't get you anywhere. It makes matters worse. Whereas even if it is their fault, if you can kind of acknowledge that you're getting upset about it is your fault, it's not theirs, then you can do something about your getting upset. And that doing something about your getting upset will actually improve their behavior, because they will no longer need to fight you, and instead they will respect you. I hope that helps. A couple of things.
That's very nice, brother, what you just said, that we need to recognize first. So for that, we need to recognize God, and we need to know that this is what you said, God's love was beautiful. The next question is, why do people fall out of love? Does true love ever end? How do you cope with the pain of letting someone go that you truly love?
It's a question of what true love is, isn't it? There's a beautiful few lines by the English 17th century, I think, might be 18th century English poet and artist William Blake. Very deeply spiritual, very rare among the British in more recent centuries. But he wrote, "He who bends to himself a joy," like you kind of try and bind that joy to yourself, "he who bends to himself a joy doth the winged life destroy." That's Old English, means destroys the life in that joy, like grabbing a butterfly, you know, to think, oh, that's beautiful, and then you've killed it. "He who bends to himself a joy doth the winged life destroy, but he who kisses the joy as it flies lives in eternity's sunrise." That's this expression of eternity's sunrise. It's like you can live constantly in like at the beginning of time, where truth in you and your connection to truth is full and real. But it's when you start losing yourself in things outside of yourself, that's when you start losing your truth, and your love no longer is really real. But we've got so much around us, these wrong ideas about love, that love means I've got to fight for you, I've got to bind you to myself, I've got to restrict your freedom if you're wanting to do something that I don't want to do. This is all very, very counterproductive of real love. Even though I don't know if you were online when I mentioned when Liz, my ex, was wanting us to separate, and I didn't want that. And this sister in London said, "Do you love Liz?" I said, "Yes." She said, "Well, you'll want what she wants then, won't you?" I still find that very funny, but you know, it was actually very good advice. If you truly love, you will liberate. You won't bend someone to you. You'll listen, you'll respect. Of course, you know, if you're a parent, you have to guide your children as well. You have to tell them, don't stick your finger in an electric socket and these sort of things. You know, children have to learn, but among adults, you know, we often make these mistakes of trying to hold on to people and pretending to ourselves that that is love, or that that's the right thing to do. Whereas anything that gets in the way of love and happiness is, I feel, is in this deeper sense, you know, it is untrue. We have to recognize that very deeply.
Thank you, brother.
Yeah, the power to be like this does come from this Raja Yoga, the whole package, you know, of the study, the spiritual study, learning what's going on, the time that the world is in, this whole package. It all helps you actually to detach from this what we see as this tired old world where this crisis of character exists, and start to build something new and fresh. That wider perspective is also helpful, but that's something where you have to sort of find out more about that through one of the Brahma Kumari's centers.
Our next question is actually linked to what you just said, but I'll read it out anyway in case you would like to add. There's a question that how do I remain constantly peaceful?
I think it's important to recognize that you probably can't. Yeah, well, I certainly can't. I've a feeling that that to think that you can would be an illusion, which might actually make matters worse because you would be frustrated when you weren't constantly peaceful. Brahma Baba, the founder of the Brahma Kumaris, he was quite funny. We hear his teachings. They kept his teachings from the last 5 years of his life, and we hear them on a regular daily basis, actually. And quite often he says that with the students who were with him at that time, he says, he asked them, you know, how much of the day would you say you spent in remembrance, meaning peaceful and loving and connected? And one of them had said 7 hours. He said, I don't believe it. Because, you know, it's there are things to deal with, and we've life to be lived, we've relationships to negotiate, we've work to do. This isn't a path of becoming just a peaceful soul on a mountaintop, you know, leaving everything. Yes, there's a part internally you can move in that direction, but you're still going to have to deal with everyday issues, and so you can't actually expect to have total peace in a peaceless world, but you can build on your peace in the ways I've been speaking of. And when you feel peaceless, as I say, a big secret is turn that back inside and say, why am I feeling peaceless? Rather than, why do these governments do such stupid things? Or why does my son behave like that? Or why does my wife do that? You know, instead of that, when something happens and you find that it's annoying you or upsetting you, go inside and think, okay, how can I strengthen myself so that this doesn't impact on me in this way?
Thank you, brother. So what we need to do is we need to work on this. How do we go deep into God's love so that we can drown into it? We can emerge from that and, you know, intensify ourselves. We emerge into the love, and then we come out so powerful, filled with that love, so that we can give it to others.
That's true, Javine. Yes, you're right. When I'm remembering Daddy Janki, who had a lifetime practicing this yoga, and if she was asked by a journalist, how much of the day do you spend meditating? She would say, the question is, how much of the day am I not meditating? Because she was so continuously keeping that connection, lost in God's love. Definitely, thank you for that reminder. I don't want to sound as if it's unreachable. It's a great goal, but we have to be realistic as well about where we're at. And then in that way, when you do see that peacelessness has come to you, go inside, turn the camera inwards so that you're thinking, now why? What was it that bugged me about this situation? And then you may see more clearly, oh, I didn't, I'd lost my memory of what God's teaching me. I was forgetting that I'm this or that, or that I mustn't have these expectations of others. Various things that we learn, but the key is not projecting our dissatisfaction outwards, but instead being very attentive to continuing to improve our internal strength.
Thank you so much, brother. That has been very, very elevating. And yes, like I said earlier, we have a lot of homework to do. We need to work on this. Thank you so much for sharing with us your wisdom today. And thank you everyone for joining us today. We will be having another session on coming Saturday at 4 p.m. Jakarta. I have dropped my number on the chat box. Do send me a message if you would like to get updated for the upcoming events. Thank you. Until then, stay safe, stay blessed.
And Jabin, let me say a big thank you to you for organizing this lovely international connection. It's been a great pleasure to be with you. This is the farthest afield I've been, I think, even online with these events. So many thanks. It's been a great pleasure.
Thank you, brother. Hopefully, maybe when everything is okay, we can have you live with us in Jakarta.
Oh, that would be fun.
Would be nice, yes.
Om Shanti.
Thank you. Have a nice day. Om Shanti.
Same to you.